I remember sitting in our car in a parking lot, and this was during our rebuild season. And I was looking at my phone and I was watching someone's highlight reel of success. And I was thinking, gosh, what did I do wrong? Like, why have we gotten to this point? Like, at that point, we had seen some success and some failure, but we were just in a really rough season. And then my next thought was, maybe I was wrong about all this. Maybe I misheard what God was telling me to do because I felt like there was things that were profitable that he had told me to put down. And I thought, maybe I'm not actually called to any of this. Maybe I've just been, showing up and running towards something that wasn't actually for me. And it was crazy because I realized in that moment, as I was starting to feel so discouraged, that this is not discernment. That is the enemy in the parking lot telling me things to discourage me in the season that God was calling me to. And we're going to dive into this. So, welcome back to the Kingdom Life Unfiltered. I'm Janeen. Today, we're going to talk about kingdom mindset. And I promise you, this is not just a self help episode dressed up in Bible verses, but really about like the spiritual battle that happens in your mind and what you're supposed to do about it. I'm going to give you some really practical ideas. So, first, let me give you three mindset traps that I see over and over again in women who are building, serving, parenting, and just trying to follow God in their lives. So, the first trap is scarcity thinking. And this one is really is this like low level belief that there's not enough money, not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough grace. I'm too old. It's too late. And here's why it's so sneaky. It's because it often disguises itself as wisdom. Like, oh, I'm just being realistic. This is just logical. I'm just being responsible. So, scarcity thinking that's dressed up as wisdom is still a lie that says that God's supply is limited. And it's not because we serve a God that owns cattle on 1,000 hills. And so nothing that we need is out of reach. We are heirs of the King. So keep that in mind and make sure that when that scarcity starts to show up and bubble up, you recognize it. The first step is really awareness. Trap number two is performance thinking. This is the belief that your value to God, to your family, to your audience, to your team, to yourself is directly connected to what it is that you produce. And if you grew up in a home where love was conditional, or if you've been in environments that rewarded output over being, this trap is like particularly brutal because you will exhaust yourself trying to earn what was already freely given if you have that like perfectionist thinking. So keep in mind that you were already chosen. You are already loved no matter what you do, no matter how much you get done that day. And so you need to rest in that thinking. And then trap number three is comparison thinking. Everyone says comparison is the thief of joy. And this one feels like motivation sometimes, right? It looks like inspiration. But when you're measuring your chapter 3 against someone else's chapter 20 and using it as evidence that something is wrong with you or your calling, that's not inspiration. That's a distraction from your actual assignment. And also, you have to keep in mind, too, that their chapter 21 may not look so pretty. You never know. I mean, this world, I mean, we have valleys and we have mountaintops. And honestly, with these three traps, like I've lived all three of these, and I'm sure many of you have too. And some days you do have to fight your way out of them. But Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So I want you to focus on those two words, transforming and renewing, because transformed is actually passive. It's something that happens to you as a result of the renewing. And renewing is this like ongoing active process. It's not a one-time prayer. It's a daily, sometimes hourly choice to replace the broken pattern with truth. And so this is not just about positive thinking, because positive thinking says, tell yourself better things. But kingdom thinking says, replace that lie with something that is actually true about who God is and who he says that you are. And that's a completely different source and a completely different strategy than just tell yourselves better things, right? And so for me personally, I grew up with a version of myself that was shaped by, kind of some trauma and abuse and just bad choices as a teen and just choices that I really made in desperation. And that version of me had this deep belief that she just wasn't enough and was too much and too damaged. And I kind of had this, like, for lack of a better word, like an F it attitude. And I just thought that, I'd never make it, I'd never be enough. And I was not enough to be trusted with something meaningful because I felt like I was just too far gone. And renewing my mind didn't mean pretending that that history didn't happen, right? It's not pretending everything's okay and just flowers and butterflies, but it meant letting God speak truth into it until the truth got louder than the lie. And that takes time. It's not just this moment of deliverance. Not that that isn't a thing, but it's a bit of a process of going through the work. And it's probably the most important work I've ever done. And so what does that look like practically? So let me give you a few things that have actually helped for me. So the first thing is truth before the noise. Before you pick up your phone, before you consume anything else or start getting into your day, really to dedicate some time to getting into your Bible first. The first thing I do before I get out of bed is I open up my Bible. And so put something true on your heart. And I know everyone's in different seasons, whether, you've got littles at home, or maybe you got to get up early to go do something, or maybe you've got a baby that's keeping you up in the middle of the night. So it doesn't always have to be like this big, long, drawn out process. Just like one verse, like just grab onto something, just a declaration, having a moment of prayer, setting the filter for the whole day. So whatever goes in first tends to stick the longest. One of my favorite things is we just got done with a full week of family camp, and that we did prayer and worship every morning, and I think every night we had worship. We had like a lot of worship. It was amazing. And I literally woke up every day with some sort of worship song in my head. And so that's something that I've been carrying through, of like, I just need more worship music on all the time. It used to be that, I listen to it every time I leave the house or in the shower or in this or that. But it's something that I've started to do when I work so that I can make sure that I am focusing on him first and seeking his kingdom first. And so the second thing is identity declarations. So hear me out on this. I'm not talking about manifesting or speaking things into existence out of thin air. I'm talking about remembering what is already true and what he's already done. So, what is already true is I am chosen, I am called, I am equipped, I am not disqualified by my past, I am not defined by the metrics. These are not wishes, these are scripture backed realities that I am choosing to remember when my brain is trying to tell me something else. And then the other thing with that is to remember, like, the gap and the gain. This is huge. There's a great book called The Gap and the Gain, and it was life changing for me because there's always going to be this gap between where you are and where you want to be. But there's also always going to be a gain of, this is where I was and this is where I am now. And if you focus on the gain instead of the gap, then you're going to focus on more gratitude, and you're going to have so much more joy, and you're going to continue to work towards that gap of where you want to be. But if you're focused on the gain, then you just come from such a place of like abundance, that abundance continues. And that is biblical. And so the third thing is the pattern interrupt. So when you catch that a thought is coming from an old pattern or it's coming from the enemy, it could be scarcity or performance or comparison. You don't have to fight it head on. You just redirect. So is this thought true? Is it from God? Is it from fear? Because it's either from God or from fear. Fear does not come from God. Okay. And that question alone tends to break the cycle. There's another thing that you can do as well is when you start to, a lot of the times a feeling may come. It's part of the habitual patterns in your body. You may start to tense up, and then your mind is going to then tell the story of what that feeling is. So like you might get a tinge of fear or a tinge of oh, I just like want to like cave in, like that feeling that comes when you want to just like shrink. And when that comes, recognize it. Just have that awareness and then try to break it off before it actually has a moment to get into your head and for your brain to tell the story. And all you really have to do is when you start to feel that, you just like straighten up a little, take a deep breath, maybe shake off for a second. And sometimes that alone will change the next thought that comes. But then have something that you rehearse every time you get that feeling so that you can start to change the habit of what your body and what your brain is telling you in those times. Okay, and then finally, proximity. So you become what you're surrounded by. And I don't say that to make you paranoid about your relationships or what you're doing, but I say it because it's true. Most of us have not been intentional enough about it. So who in your life is thinking kingdom? Who is building with faith and integrity and truth? Get closer to those people. And you may be in a situation where you're like, well, I don't know anyone like that. I can't get closer to people like that. That is when the internet, it can be like your best friend, because here's what it comes down to is, a lot of people are on Netflix, just kind of scrolling through life or scrolling through social media. Go be intentional about what you're putting in your head and who you're spending time with, whether that's the books you read, the videos you watch, different, there's so much free information out there these days of different podcasts and YouTubes and different Christian influencers that are talking about kingdom mindset and talking about ways to grow in a biblical way, biblical leadership. And that is something that we are really dedicated to here, and we've got something really awesome coming soon that I'll share in an upcoming episode. But really be intentional about what you're spending time with and who is in proximity to you, whether that is your relationships or even just like what you're watching or listening to, even music. I mean, when I listen to certain kinds of music, I actually will get flashbacks of my past or flashbacks of feelings of my past. And so you can actually change that just by listening to worship music, by listening to something that's going to feed your soul. Okay, so your challenge for this week is identify your dominant mindset trap. Just one. Is it scarcity, performance, comparison? Every time you catch yourself this week, ask yourself, what is actually true right now? And I would even recommend having like a little note card with you that has some truths that you can dive into. And I'll put a link in here with a couple of my favorites too that you can check out. And so that's it. That's the whole assignment. Just start focusing on more truth and telling yourself those declarations and that truth over and over again throughout the day. All right, so next week, super excited. We're going to go somewhere kind of tender. We're going to talk about what to actually do when you're in the valley, because there are times that God feels absent. Like it talks about, the Israelites in the desert, and that dream feels like dead and faith feels like you're just kind of going through the motions. And it's one of the most important conversations that we're going to have this season. So don't skip it. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week and share this with someone that you think it'll help. And we'd love if you could subscribe and leave us a review so we can get the word out to more people. But we'll see you next week. Love you all much.